Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of SupplyChainBrain, and I will be your moderator for this panel conversation on the future of enterprise mobility. One quick housekeeping note, we will be taking questions from the audience throughout the presentation. So if you have a question while our speakers are talking, feel free to just click on that Q&A button in the bottom of your screen and input your question. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, Windows CE, Windows Mobile, is now end of life and unsupported in terms of growth. While Windows Mobile had been the backbone of enterprise mobile technology for decades, those days have firmly passed, with the majority of the market now choosing Android as the operating system of choice. So now, with the stress of the coronavirus pandemic on the supply chain, it's clear that those who transitioned to Android earlier are ahead of the curve, and those who haven't transitioned need to do so as soon as possible. With that, I'd like to introduce the members of our panel. I'm going to be saying your name and title and company, and I'd like you to say something very quick and brief about yourself, each of you, as I introduce you. Greg Henry, Vice President of Client Solutions with Barcoding, Inc. Greg, welcome.
Thank you. Been in the industry 30 years. My role at Barcoding is to really manage all of our customer-facing solutions.
Thank you. Shash Anand, Vice President of Product Strategy with SOTI, Inc. Hello, Shash.
Hey, Bob. How are you? I've been with the company for about 11 years at SOTI and in a variety of different roles. Product strategy is really focused around the tight integration of the various software tools available in our SOTI One platform. And I also focus on the roadmap for each of our products.
Thank you. Kevin Lawlick, Senior Sales Engineer for Zebra Technologies. Hello, Kevin.
Hey, Bob, good to see you and good to be here. 35-year veteran of the auto ID and data collection business, most recently coming off a role within Zebra, looking after our developer and Android platform strategies.
Thank you. And Sam Gonzalez, Director of Global Systems and Solutions with Ivanti Wavelink.
Hey, so I have been in the industry for about 10 years, and I have considered myself to be a supply chain geek long before Barcoding created a hashtag out of it. And I am lucky enough to be able to run our global technical sales team.
Thank you. And by the way, that supply chain geek down in the corner there, that is Jody Costa representing Barcoding, and she'll be taking those audience questions and fielding them to me as the presentation goes on. So let's get started. I talked about the transition to Android, painful or not, depending on how early or how late companies are doing it, but I want to ask each of you this question. In working with your own customers, how are you seeing this transition play out? Greg?
Well, last year we were making a lot of progress. As COVID hit, what we really found was kind of two areas. The folks that had begun the transition, obviously many of them got projects put on hold as people were furloughed, so their projects got delayed. The folks that hadn't started because they had projects ahead of that had those projects put on hold, and so their Android deployments are even pushed out further. My advice really here is don't, for those, as we come back to work, don't get all worried about the pressure to install Android quickly just to get a win, but, go through the process, understand how you can really leverage the technology to improve your business and your people's productivity.
Well, we're certainly going to be doing a deep dive into all of those points that Greg just made as this conversation proceeds, but I'd like to direct that same question about your own customers, how it's playing out to Shash. What's going on with you folks?
Yeah, so from a management perspective, we're seeing a lot of customers kind of doing this transition and bringing about innovation in their own business operations, which is pretty cool. They're coming up with new ideas, how to transition from, say, paper and pen processes and start using more automated procedures. They're looking for more granularity in terms of, remote workers that are coming in and coming in an abundance, and how do we handle those types of scenarios. So as you guys may know, like over 72% of the world's mobile devices are using Android, and Android has the most devices and the most users in the world. So with this huge ecosystem out there, it's pretty exciting to kind of see what customers are trying to do in the market today.
Kevin, what are you seeing?
So actually, we're seeing a lot of, sometimes it depends. It depends on the market that our customers are in. When you look at the more customer-centric operations like retail or healthcare, they've made the migration to Android quickly, and they're still continuing to do so even during this difficult time. Markets that are traditionally looking to maximize the investment that they make in technology are still, making the transition into Android. But there are some things that we're able to do on the platform, which is starting to accelerate their movement towards a new platform, such as enabling a richer experience or adding capabilities such as proximity tracing into the platform to really move this process forward.
Sam, what's the story over at Ivanti Wavelink?
Yeah, so we've noticed, when it comes to technology adoption all the way back to the DOS days, there's always been a couple of different types of customers, right? You have your early adopters that like to jump on the technology bandwagon, but that represents a pretty small segment of the market. The majority of our market traditionally tends to be take a wait and see approach, right? Let's let other people be on the bleeding edge. We'll see how it works out. We'll move when we have to. Which is kind of the situation we found ourselves in now, right? Windows is now, the support has ended, and there's still people that are developing their Android strategies. But what we've really found with this global pandemic is that those customers that invested in technology early, it's really paying dividends for them now, because it's not just a move from one platform to another. It's a way of opening up an entire new realm of solutions that you didn't have access to before. So people that adopted Android early were able to start shifting their focus to, okay, now what other solutions can I bring in to make us more productive, more accurate, move more product with the same number of people? And the people that made those investments early are really benefiting from that now.
And yet, even those early adopters could not have imagined what the world was going to look like in 2020 with the pandemic. It's obviously drastically changed since Windows Mobile went on its end-of-life journey. Now, barcoding research has found that the stress of the pandemic has applied pressure directly to IT and operations, not just to stay running, but to improve productivity without putting people at risk. And so with that in mind, I want to once again put out a question to the whole panel, one by one, and that is, how do you see enterprise mobile playing a role in improving productivity for companies in the current pandemic environment? Greg?
Interesting question, because the answer is probably the same whether you're in a pandemic or not. But at its core, mobile technology is all about replacing paper. And so in a pandemic kind of environment, you're eliminating those human transactions as you pass that paper or data from one individual to another. But really the power of mobile is in the ability to improve processes and improve people's productivity.
Mm-hmm. Shash?
Yeah, just to add on to what Greg's saying there, I think that it's very important to note here that the adoption of Android from Windows has really meant a lot more newer devices. It's meant more powerful devices. So these devices have a lot more functionality. They're easier to use. They're more reliable comparatively. They're more fluid applications. There's a better user experience. There's better connectivity capabilities. So this has all helped to increase productivity of the different set of users. And just to add on, the speed of business is constantly increasing. And so to maintain that competitive edge, these Android devices, they have to be ready to go as soon as they're out of the box. As soon as you take them out, they've got to be ready to go. There's business critical applications that have to be preloaded onto these devices. You've got to support BYOD devices. You've got to support corporate data that must be secured on those kind of work devices where you have a work profile and you maybe have a personal side. So these are becoming the new norms in every work environment that we're seeing so far.
Kevin, you see the same thing playing out from your perspective?
Yes, absolutely. I think even more so. What we're really starting to see, especially when you look at the workforce that's behaving in this in this current environment that we're in, there's a lot of people taking on tasks that they have to get up to speed quickly on, i.e., you might have a shift worker working a double shift or an extended shift or even a short shift, and they're bringing more people and able to fill the gaps. Where these more modern platforms, which require very little user training in order for people to be able to be productive with, almost immediately, so to speak, it's really enabling this workforce to pick up. In addition, we're seeing enhancements that are being made to workflow. Gadgets that accompany the mobile devices that are enabling maintenance workers to work on machines that they haven't worked on in the past. Things like heads-up displays are now being enabled through these platforms, which is starting to again drive a different way of operation in this current pandemic environment.
Sam, what do you see on the productivity angle?
Yeah, well, I mean, all things considered, I think it comes down to flexibility. And Bob, you said something I think really resonates with a lot of our customers, which is the simple fact that nobody saw this coming. 6 months ago, nobody could have predicted that we were going to be where we're at right now. And so I think ultimately it means that whether it's moving to a new platform or picking a solution, you need something that is going to be flexible and going to be able to change based on the demands that are put on you. And let's face it, the Windows CE, Windows Mobile platform, it has not been growing for quite some time. It's one of those solutions that people locked it down 10 years ago and didn't touch it. But with Android, we have a whole new set of possibilities that are available to us. And the application designers that are truly innovative are putting out solutions that are not just a, drop it in and this is what you get. It's something that's flexible that you can change over time and can grow with your business, or that you can turn on a dime when something unexpected hits your business to adjust for demand.
Well, Sam, you just touched on what I want to ask you folks in the next question. So I'd ask the rest of the panel this. I mean, we've already, in the short time we've been having this conversation, made a pretty good case for why companies must invest now in a modern mobile platform. But why Android specifically? Greg?
Well, if you look at the short list of options you have, it's iOS, which is Apple, which only runs on Apple devices. You've got Windows 10, which is primarily a tablet and PC operating system. And then Android, what Android really provides you is not only a broad spectrum of hardware platforms, from consumer devices to enterprise class devices, but it's got a huge ecosystem of application providers and tool providers. So in a word, Android gives you options.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think it's a good answer there. Why don't we move on to the next question, because we have a lot more I want to ask you folks. And, we know that an investment in a modern mobile platform, great way to stay competitive, improve the customer experience, et cetera, but there are many out there who have not yet made the investment to change. So let's discuss how to enact that change. Greg, I want to direct this one to you specifically. How should companies begin preparing to make the case for upgrading mobile technology?
So at Barcoding, we always say start with why. And that's really about looking at your current state of your people and your processes, and then envision what a future state could be. And as you look at that future state, you're improving your productivity, you're improving your processes. You need to look at, can mobile technology, because technology is always the third thing we look at, influence that? And if the answer is yes, then you begin the real work of putting together a very detailed plan of, what kind of applications do I need? What kind of training do I need? Deployment strategies, support strategies, and so forth.
Yeah. Well, a lot of companies, when they get into any kind of new technology, tend to sort of develop it behind the scenes and then just dump it on the users. And I guess I kind of know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear Shash's view on why it actually is important to involve users early in the planning stages.
Yeah, sure, Bob. It's one of the most important ways for us to adopt to create a change management strategy. Users in general, they need to feel like they're part of that change. Otherwise, they look for reasons to say no. They want to be contributing, and you need to take their input into account when you're kind of implementing new procedures. User feedback is extremely important. And as Sam mentioned earlier, as well as Greg, Android is extremely flexible. And so it could really be adapted to everybody's needs, depending on the scenario, right? And the other thing is if common practices and trends in designing apps and general development are followed, you know, these people are very familiar with the way Android applications work and how they're used in the experience. And so if you can follow those guidelines when you're building applications, that'll go a long way in helping users feel more comfortable every time there is an update. And you know, there has to be this paradigm shift from a Windows user to an Android user of Android has this knack for providing updates regularly. And that means that there's always going to be improvements coming on a regular basis, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. It's not just a one-time set it and forget it kind of experience.
Kevin, have you seen data that compares the total cost of ownership of consumer products versus enterprise rugged products? Is Apple going to be the factor for enterprises planning to change?
Yeah, actually, that's there has been some quite extensive studies on that. I know that EDC and John Golden Associates, or I'm sorry, VDC and John Golden Associates have done extensive studies on that. And what's interesting is when you look at the cost of initial acquisition, it may seem more cost effective to go with a consumer device, but when you amortize that effective cost over a 3-year period or a 5-year period, the scale drastically flips. Think of Apple, for example. In order to be able to make an Apple device truly enterprise ready, you know, it's got to last for more than a shift, which may need an additional battery. If you want to scan enable it, you add a scanner sled and so on. All of those individual components add up to make an enterprise class device. And then you're at the mercy of when a form factor change happens, you know, 24 months down the road. It, you know, in a sense, obsoletes all the accessories that you make the investment in. So looking at a purpose-built for purpose platform really makes a difference, plus the fact that they're really targeted to remain in the work environment for you know, a minimum entire product life cycle, in our vernacular, 6 years all the way up to 10 years. So, you know, this is, you are making an investment for the long haul.
Yeah, and imagine there's some issues of security and control over your devices if they are the enterprise model and not just the consumer kind. But yeah, Shash, how has how has Android enterprise changed since January?
Since January, there's been quite a few changes. For those of you that may not be familiar with Android, Android comes out with a brand new operating system pretty much every year. They were following an alphabet model, and now it's kind of going into version numbers. So Android 10 last year, Android 11 this year. And Android has really sustained investment in the enterprise world. And what I mean by that is Android 11, for example, which is just recently coming out, has been talked about and recently was part of the Android Summit that came out recently, has gone much deeper into work profiles, asset management for company-owned devices. So it's really improving the separation between work and personal. And so when we talk about this idea of a modern platform, that's what you want. You want a company that's focused, a platform that's focused on security. You know, having flexible deployment options. These are all new things that have come out. Zero-touch enrollment is continuously expanding, which means that when I turn that device on, it automatically enrolls from whenever you purchased it. It's just ready to go. The support capabilities have expanded immensely. You can now, you know, remote control devices, get advanced diagnostics about devices, understand battery consumption right down to the, you know, what app is using what battery, how many charge cycles does this device have. There's a whole concept of a Play Store, Google Play Store, and so this is, you know, as Greg mentioned earlier, it's the application ecosystem that's just growing so fast. So you're continuously seeing a more stable platform, new capabilities, but they're getting more granular. They're down to, for example, if I want to do an update, can I do it when the device is charging? Can I do it when the device is idle? Can I do it when I'm on Wi-Fi only? So there's many changes, and it's all about becoming more granular, more automated when it comes to kind of Android management capabilities.
Yeah, Shash, I'm going to break in here real quick.
Sure.
So we do have a question coming in from the audience, and it's around the projections and kind of the future that you all see around enterprise mobility management, or MDM, mobile device management. So what that's looking like in your perspective over, let's say, the next 3 years. I think that's a good piggyback on kind of where you left off. Just maybe summarize that for the group. And Sam, if you want to jump in after, that would be great.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I mean, obviously, I think that we've been on a trajectory for a while with mobile device management and Android. And I think what's really interesting is that there's been a lot of pushback in parts of our industry to move to this model, because it means opening up to the cloud. It means doing things in a different way. It means giving up a little bit of control over your ecosystem to outside things, for Google to be able to say, no, you have to update. But I think what it's also underscoring is that people are starting to see how important that really is, right? How important it is to be up to date with security. The fact that you can't stay on a dark network forever. And also the importance of being able to scale very, very quickly. So for example, during this pandemic, there's been a lot of people that have had to pop up temporary warehouses, distribution centers. If you were to set those up in a traditional way on a dark network in a closed system, it doesn't work. But if you're already adopted the cloud and you've adopted Android Enterprise, you're in a much better position. All you need is an internet connection, and you can stand up a warehouse very quickly to suit demand.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that mobile device management becomes very important when you're talking about a fleet of over 10 devices in general, right? Especially when they're spread out across an organization. And as Sam said, security is of the utmost importance in this scenario. So when your devices are not centrally managed, you're doing a lot of things manually. As users become accustomed to these new devices, they will run into challenges. They will run into issues because they're adopting a kind of a new way to do things. And so it's important that you have device management there to kind of be able to do things like remote into a device and help users out in real time. It's important to diagnose issues in real time. And the capabilities around device management allow you to really improve your business operations. Think about simple things like lost or stolen devices, and how do I locate them within the four walls or outside the four walls? Can I be proactive? Can I create geofencing rules to say, if the devices ever leave an area, notify me right away? Can I blacklist and whitelist applications? Can I lock down the device to a certain set of apps? So throughout the years, you're going to see that there's been so many evolutions of Android where they're adding in more capabilities around device management. But if I go a step further, it's about building apps and the perception that building apps in the past, could have been months and years. Now it's down to minutes. You can very easily take that paper-based form that Greg was talking about and convert it to a mobile app in a matter of minutes these days. Diagnosing apps, getting logs from devices, very, very quick. One button to get a log and kind of, synchronize your files, screen annotation, remote into devices. All of these capabilities are brand new things, and they're really well integrated to your entire mobile operations.
So Sam, are there issues though with companies migrating existing telnet or web applications over to Android, and why would that be more productive?
Yeah, so, with any new platform, or with anything in general, right, you're only as strong as the weakest component. So you can have a really, really powerful new device, but if you're trying to do things exactly the same way you did on the old devices, you're not necessarily going to get the benefit from that. So for example, if you try to take a standard telnet application and put it on on an all touchscreen interface, and it's expecting you to use a lot of function keys, everything's very keyboard driven in the Windows world. You're not really going to be realizing those productivity gains. Now, luckily, partners such as Zebra have put out some pretty fantastic Android devices with full keyboards, and for some use cases that's phenomenal, and that helps bridge that gap. But they also have a real lineup of touch screen only devices. They maybe have 2-3 buttons total, and for those, moving some of these old apps just isn't going to work. So you want to make sure that as you're migrating those applications, that you're using something that's able to upgrade that user interface to something a little bit more modern, to take those same back-end processes, but add a touch interface to customize the layout for the device that you're using, to be able to start adding intelligence around, popping up the right keys at the right time or automating tasks. So I guess my message would be that, there are some challenges moving those kinds of systems over to Android, but it also brings with it a lot of opportunities. With the right technologies, you don't have to rip and replace a back-end system to be able to realize all of these new capabilities on the new platform.
Well, theory is
one more time. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jody. Hop right in. Sure.
So I also have another question that's come in that I'm kind of going to paraphrase and rework a little bit. And Greg, I'll send this one to you, but maybe just explain for the audience how a company like Barcoding works with the variety of partners that are on the call with us today to help within this chain. So just give kind of a snapshot, because the question was around basically how do we all work together?
Right. So yeah, what we represent here today is pieces of the puzzle, right? And what Barcoding's role really is to be the glue as a solutions provider to pull all those pieces together and work with our customers to integrate them as seamlessly as possible, which includes partnering with MDM products, partnering with hardware products, partnering with application providers, user training, deployment strategies, support strategies, really taking that holistic view and ensuring that you don't go into a project with 80% of it thought through. You've got it 100% thought through so that it is as successful as can be.
Sam, just how should companies support the long-term training of users?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found traditionally is that with a lot of customers that we work with, there's traditionally a lot of tribal knowledge that's in a warehouse or distribution center. So training gets really difficult. People are handed a device and they say, oh, how do I do this? And a veteran comes over and says, oh, it's really easy. You hit Control F5, select option 3, scan this barcode, and then hit Control F3. And for them, it's second nature because they've been doing it for a long time. But for a new user, that's really, really confusing. And so that means that, it's going to take them a long time to memorize it. They're going to consistently be, interrupting people to go say, hey, how did you do that again? Which means they're walking away from what they're supposed to be doing. They're pulling somebody else away from what they're supposed to be doing to ask these questions. Well, things have changed a lot on the consumer side, where nowadays we have people who are consistently downloading and consuming very complex apps that do very complex things without ever looking at a manual. And so what that's shown is that with the right UI design, with the right focus on making an intuitive interface, you can basically negate the bulk of training needs. If you have the right front end to an app, you can hand it to somebody off the street and they can intuitively know what they're supposed to do with that app. Then that allows you to focus your training time on things like safety and how to handle products properly. Or today, maybe sanitation practices, instead of what buttons you push to make the app do what you want to do.
I just... Oh, go ahead, please, Kevin.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. No, I just wanted to,
add
a little context to that as well. Sam, you gave a great example as far as you press Shift Control F5 in order to be able to close out an order. But what's interesting with these modern tools, especially even during terminal emulation sessions, we can put a button on the screen that says Close Order, where it sends to the back-end system at the Shift Control F5, and the user's none the wiser, and they're immediately instructed, rather than having to memorize a sequence of keys, a way to quickly interact with the application, again, to that point, reinforcing the ability for us to be able to execute quickly and minimize the amount of training that these users have. So
yeah, can I jump in here too? A question to piggyback on this, and we can start with you, Kevin, is that, for companies that are only using a TE application and are maybe unsure of the investment into Android, could you kind of summarize the benefits of making that move versus kind of staying where you are?
Sure, and I'm sure others will jump in here too. But I think the main gist of this is number one, you're going to a platform based on Android. It allows you to make the transition, and it gives you a platform in which you can ease the migration going forward. You don't have to necessarily flip a switch in order to be able to enable terminal emulation on the Android platform any different than what's existing on your existing Windows Mobile or Windows CE. You can provide that like-for-like functionality, but it also gives you the ability to start to make these incremental changes in workflow and user dynamic to start to realize the value of this. And Sash, I think you probably, or Sam probably have a little bit more color to add to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. I'll just touch on it real briefly, and I'll just say this, that things have evolved a lot with Android, and people are heavily invested in their telnet infrastructure. The back-end systems, maybe for some companies that we talk to, they've put millions in and years fine-tuning the processes. The business logic is sound, the process is sound. The problem, or I should say the bottleneck, is the user interface. We don't need to throw away that investment in the back end. There are tools out there, ours included, and this isn't a plug for ours, but you can look around. There's ways to take those old green screen interfaces and turn them into a modern interface while still maintaining your investment in your back end system, so you can get the best of both worlds.
Well,
Josh, did you have a comment? Oh, go ahead, Greg.
On top of that, you can also add like voice to them now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well.
Capability you didn't have a year ago or 2 years ago.
Well, all of you have made an extremely compelling case for why companies need to make the switch, but I imagine that some companies that might be listening to this presentation right now, who are latecomers to the game, who are late adopters, might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now as to like, what do we do? Where do we start? So I'd just like to hear from the panel the best piece of advice you could give to a company that hasn't yet made the move to Android. Who wants to start on that? Greg, you want to give us a little bit?
I would say get your users involved early. As Shash said earlier, if users adopt it, it will be successful. If users aren't brought in and aren't bought in, your success rate drops tremendously.
I think, if I can add, experience matters, I think, in this scenario. So partnering with experts that have performed hundreds of migrations, if not thousands of migrations already, who know the migration path, that can really help make it a seamless process. Take, for example, if you're buying a car, right, and you look at, say, a Tesla, an electric vehicle versus a standard car now, you can see that, and I kind of use this example because Android is very much on a similar path, right? Now, I own a Tesla, and it constantly is getting updated regularly. There's new features coming out in the car. The experience has changed. It has an alarm system. It records all my drives now. So there's just new things that come out, and this is on a monthly basis. And the Tesla vehicle is taking everything 5 years ahead of when, if you were to buy a standard car, how often does your standard car change? It doesn't change that often because you'd have to take it in order to kind of do certain updates. So the update process is a lot longer. And you got to go through a recall, you got to get notified. So all that takes, with a Tesla, it's updated like this, and you can control it a little bit, which is cool. And that's what Android brings to you. It's a very similar type of experience. There's constant updates that are happening for you to enhance your functionality and security. The application management is a huge differentiator when you compare it to Windows. And as we said, there's a massive ecosystem out there. So what you are experiencing, or what you think you will be experiencing, it's been done before, and people know exactly kind of what you're going through, whether it's terminal emulation and Sam's tools to easily convert you over. It doesn't take months and years to do these things. It takes, it could, when properly planned, it could take days, weeks.
Kevin, you have a comment on that? A little bit of advice to a newcomer who is currently panicking as they listen to you guys speak?
Yeah, I think the point's been made, by Sash and Greg. We've done this before. Seriously, since I've been in this industry, this is probably about the 6th or 7th operating system revolution we've been through. all the way from, you know, proprietary operating systems or applications were written to assembler to DOS, Windows Mobile, you know, the beginnings of Pocket PC. We even had a thread on Palm for a while, and then several iterations of both, you know, Windows Mobile and Windows CE, and now Android. You know, we've done this before, but we also at the same time appreciate your angst. You know, we get it, we understand it. So that, and then, you know, always involve your end users. They are the ones that are going to make or break the success of your implementation. So you know, you definitely get their buy-in on these things.
Sam, what do you tell people when they're wondering about this?
So I'll start by saying, you know, one of my favorite things about working in the supply chain industry is that we have a fantastic partner community. I always joke with people that once you're in the industry, nobody ever leaves. They just move around companies. And I think it's because of those relationships that you build within the partner community. And so my advice would be, don't do it alone, right? You have trusted advisors in these partners, whether it's Barcoding, whether it's software providers, whether it's Zebra. Lean on them, right? Do your research, but then also pull in those trusted advisors and have them help you build your case for your company. Help them, ask them the hard questions, make sure it really is right for you. You're not in it alone. The challenges that we face as an industry are hard, and you need help to be able to tackle them properly.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here too, that some of the advice that I would say based on some of the workshops that we held last summer, all of those things, and look at this as a true business opportunity. And I think that when you view this from that lens of this is a real chance to make some gains and leverage these rugged mobile devices for a lot more than maybe they had been used in the past, then you really can get everybody excited, whether that's down from the user level or up into senior leadership. And I think that's where you can start to really build your case. We have another question too, how to kind of maximize your investment in enterprise business applications. And I think that would be kind of directly in line with maybe the mobile technology piece. So I would say probably Greg.
Sure. Maximize.
Maximizing your investment. Maybe like think about it in terms of how you can maximize your investment in the applications. I would think probably.
I mean, I think the key is these devices are incredibly powerful now. They've got lots of memory. They got lots of horsepower in the processors. They can do much more than we could do 10 years ago with a Windows CE device, right? When this industry started, they were pretty much single or limited purpose devices. You use them to collect data. As the devices have matured and extended in their functionality, you can do much more than that. You've got rich displays of data. You've got the ability to capture data from lots of different technologies, whether it's BLE, RFID, scanning, imaging. So think, don't limit what the device can do for you. Look at, you know, applications in your warehouse, in your stores, for your salespeople, for your accounting people. I mean, there's anywhere that we can free people to interact with their job at that point of contact is where mobile wins. So, you know, just let your imagination run.
Great. You know,
Go ahead,
do you want to come in again, Jody?
I have one more question. I think I can
be my guest.
Good audience. Yes, thank you. Keep using that Q&A function. So Kevin, there's some questions around basically the rugged device roadmap, for lack of a better word. So kind of thinking through maybe from the Zebra perspective, kind of what you're seeing out there in terms of the Android platform for future mobile devices, tablets. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's always a you know, kind of like a top of mind question for everybody. When you look at the enterprise deployments and you compare and contrast that with what we experience on a day-to-day basis with our, Android devices that we get from Verizon or whoever. The update cadence just kind of happens where we know that businesses can't necessarily tolerate a change without them qualifying and testing their applications first. So with that, there's mechanisms in place in order to be able to control these OS updates, and that's kind of a key variant there. One of the things that we've also seen as Android has evolved, which we've started down this path, I want to say about 11 years ago. No, 2011, sorry, about 9 years ago, is that Android has been doing, Google and Android has been doing a great job of taking into context the requirements of the enterprise. Early on, security was non-existent to a degree. There was a lot of things left in the open. You could pick up any device and be able to get into it. Now it's really top of mind as far as their strategy going forward. A lot of the things that we've built into and when I say we, I'm talking not necessarily Zebra, but the industry overall, that we've built into the platform in order to be able to provide enhanced level of control of the devices and security and so on. Google's starting to build that into the platform, so we see this as definitely a go forward strategy with a kind of a long tail going in behind it. And the reason I say that is, this is really not going to go away anytime soon, which, I'm sure early on there was a big fear because there was a lot of different choices from a mobile operating system standpoint. The advantage that we have with Android as a platform is it is an open source platform. At its core, we and other manufacturers within the industry have the ability to be able to apply patches to older variants of operating system, to be able to keep our customers current with the new system requirements that are going forward, and be able to provide our engineers in order to be able to enhance the work that's going on going forward in order to be able to keep these platforms current. So at the end of the day, it's a long-term win-win for these platforms. In fact, we even have a strategy for our devices where we will continue to provide security patches and updates for the operating system long after our devices go into sale. As long as they're being serviced and part of that service life cycle, we'll continue to provide the software updates for that at an OS level.
Great. I want to pick up on an earlier comment, I think, what Sam made about don't try to go it alone, because that dovetails perfectly into this next section I want to ask you guys about, and that is the future of enterprise mobile support. Now, I think we can agree that it requires good partnerships, and Barcoding's research shows that nearly 30% of companies plan to outsource the management of their mobile devices to a third party. So I would imagine that in today's environment, that number certainly will continue to increase. So let's dive into how companies can best support and manage a mobile platform for future success. I want to ask Greg, what are some of the biggest support differences that Android users should be aware of as they transition away from CE?
Well, as Sam and Shash have said, and Kevin as well, the operating system is constantly changing, right? So for those of us that have deployed Windows CE, for the last 5-6 years, it's been pretty stagnant. And folks that had deployed MDM tools, really not out of their own, how do I phrase that? Not as a negative, but they stopped using them because there was nothing to do with them. There were no updates to be pushed. With Android, that is not the case. You've got the OS updates, you've got the application updates, you've got manufacturer device updates. It is not a set it and forget it world. So as part of your deployment strategy, you really need to be thinking about what is my support strategy? How am I going to keep up to date with all these updates? How am I going to determine which ones are meaningful to me? How am I going to test those before I deploy them to the whole population of devices? I would like to say MDMs are highly recommended. The reality is MDMs are mandatory. Without an MDM tool, you can deploy, but you certainly can't support.
I'll second that statement there, Greg. And also, to the point of our familiarity with Windows CE, Windows Mobile was kind of a set it and forget it approach. But in order for us to be able to maintain a secure posture, these operating system updates and the reliance on an MDM to deliver those updates is kind of key. If you look at the majority of the vulnerabilities that have been exposed recently, it's all been at the physical layer. The Wi-Fi radio or the Wi-Fi stack itself, can be compromised to a degree, but also patched. The Bluetooth stack, compromised but patchable, and those patches have to be applied at the OS level. With Windows Mobile and Windows CE, since they're not being patched, it opens up a degree of vulnerability at the physical layer. With maintaining a secure posture in Android, patches and reliance on the MDM is really critical. So good point there, Greg.
Well, Kevin, let me ask you, how many OS releases do Zebra products typically get, and do you think that'll change in the future?
Zebra products get updates as we get commitment from the chipset vendors to provide the board support packages for said OS variant. We rely a lot on Qualcomm and and Intel, that when they say they're going to support a processor through X generation, we kind of depend on them for that. But where we come into play is, we also have the good ability not only to go forward or continue forward, with 10, 11, could be 12 in the future, as long as we're getting the support packages from the silicone vendors. And this is pretty much a truth industry wide. We will commit to providing those updates going forward.
Thanks. Shash, we've heard just Greg say the importance of having an MDM, mobile device management, MDM.
That's
I got that right on the acronym.
Right.
I want to make sure that we know what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
What are some of the tools available to effectively manage Android enterprise devices?
So there's a number of tools available. This is kind of what our core competency is from a SOTI perspective in terms of managing devices. So I mentioned a few of them earlier, but being able to, one of course is to deploy in a one-to-many model. To add on to what Kevin said, controlling OS updates is extremely important. Zebra has been one of the leaders actually in allowing controlled OS updates with kind of something called firmware over the air, being able to very seamlessly say, hey, I'd like to have these devices upgraded first and then maybe move these ones over at a later point in time, as opposed to having your entire fleet be updated all at the exact same time. So you can get very, very granular, and you can create amazing conditions around those capabilities. A lot of companies are looking to, they're worried about the abundance of applications that are available, and that's why there's tools that can allow you to blacklist and whitelist applications, and even lock down the device to just a certain set of, like a kiosk mode, and to say this is the only app I want, or maybe these are the only 3 apps I want, and there's no ability to go and get any other applications. You can kind of remove the ability to get to the Play Store as well. There are tools around building mobile applications, so beyond kind of the traditional device management of deploying updates, and how you can get very granular with that and create crazy conditions. But building apps is something that is also very easily available. And you don't need to be a developer to even build applications now. You can use drag and drop capabilities. You can get, if you want to get into simple apps, if you want to get into more complicated apps, you'd kind of work with somebody like a Barcoding to kind of get you into those more advanced applications. But also diagnosing apps. Can I remote control in? Can I see exactly what's going on your screen? Can I annotate and draw on the screen, and you draw as well? Can we do video conferencing? Can I get your logs? So getting logs from an Android device is a bit challenging. You'd have to physically connect your device to a laptop in many cases, but with an MDM tool, you can just press one button and you get the entire log that a developer would want to use to debug problems. So troubleshooting becomes way more easier. And you can do things like device snapshots. You can kind of say, hey, how did my device look yesterday and how did it look today, and how can I compare it with another device? And very easily identify the differences. Pattern recognition in terms of battery. Zebra is one of the leaders in providing battery information about, the number of charge cycles your battery has left in it. Application usage, I can see where my apps are being used, when they're being used, how much data they're consuming, whether the signal strength is strong enough in that area from a carrier perspective, from a Wi-Fi perspective. Multi-user is something that's a big norm. So if I want to have this device shared because I'm in a shift work scenario, I can do that. I can very easily just give the device to somebody else and they're up and running with their apps in a matter of seconds. So there's a ton of new tools that are available, and that's why it's really important that if you feel that this is a lot to take on, I think that's why these partners are there to help you and really ask you the whys first of what you're trying to do. And if it's to start off, we can do this in incremental places and do it slowly. Yeah.
Let me get Sam's take on how do you manage applications on Android Enterprise.
Yeah, I think an important thing to know, we talk a lot about the Android updates that are being pushed and how they're becoming a mandatory thing. And everybody's kind of touched on that, but not a lot of people realize how that affects the applications. So from an application perspective, we're on a consistent treadmill keeping up with Android. Every time Android releases a new version, they tend to, they deprecate a lot of things and they add new functionality. So we may need to go back and change the way we've done things in the past because they've taken some things away in favor of maybe a more secure method of doing it. So we have to refactor that. And then we also have to, we want to take advantage of the latest technologies that are available. So what that means from an application perspective is that when you are updating your Android OS, you are likely also going to be updating your apps to a newer version. You can't necessarily lock down a single version of an app and expect that to work through, infinite iterations of Android. And so I think that really just emphasizes how important it is to have a good testing strategy in this new world. Shash touched on this. Customers that have been early adopters generally do a thing where they have a small pool of test devices that get the updates much, much earlier, near the beginning of their availability. Somewhere in the general population, so they're still going through and doing the same work as everybody else, but then you're able to monitor, was my productivity impacted? Did we have more problems on these devices? Did anything pop up that's a red flag before we push this out to the general population? And if you do that, then that's going to give you plenty of runway to make sure you get those issues resolved before it goes out to the general population and affects you during, say, a peak time.
Strong case for outsourcing support. I'm just wondering if anyone on this panel thinks it's even possible or feasible to manage an Android-based enterprise mobility platform on your own. I mean, is that even an option these days? Anybody think so?
I mean, it's possible, but you need those resources need to be employed by the company, right?
Exactly.
And so,
yeah.
And who wants to do that these days?
Well, with a lot of companies too, they may have a management platform in place for their existing big Windows 10 devices. Where adding in the mobile architecture is an option as well. I know a lot of the MDM players that are out there. They manage computing as an ecosystem, peeling off mobility as its own separate think of it as a site or entity. You can encompass Android and to some degree even iOS, for that matter. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bob, I would say too, something that we hear often is just kind of weigh the customers are weighing, what is on their plate, right? So does outsourcing enable them to do other value added projects for the organization? If they don't have to do everything, can they focus better, or is it a more value added for the company to have direct ownership? I think that's something that each organization has to kind of weigh on their own, but we are seeing significant a significant benefit to outsourcing these types of tasks to companies who do it day in, day out, like barcoding, and allowing those internal IT resources to pivot to other more value-added things, especially in the current climate.
It's the classic analysis that companies make when they talk about outsourcing anything. What is my core competency? What is the value in a partner and that kind of thing? No different here, I'm guessing. Quick question to Shash. I want to ask you about why are quote unquote as a service purchasing options important in terms of the new Android platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we mentioned, as most of us have mentioned, Android is changing pretty much on a monthly basis, and keeping up is of course challenging. So as a service is really, in my mind, the new norm, because it makes the upfront costs of purchasing that much easier. You can purchase software on a monthly basis if desired. You can cancel at any time. So this provides the flexibility for end customers to be able to switch providers if they want to, if they're not happy with the services that they're getting. So this, in my mind, it keeps the service providers honest and constantly evolving their services. And for Android, this represents kind of the entire ecosystem of hardware as well as software providers. So we've you know, from our company's perspective, we're an as a service type of model as well.
Jody, you got an audience question?
I sure do. I sure do. So it kind of piggybacks on what we've been talking about. So the question is really around cloud applications. So with a lot of applications going to the cloud, no need to apply a thick client to the devices themselves. And you know, how does that change how things are managed or supported if there's not a thick client update that needs to happen?
Yeah.
I can start with that one. I would say that there are definitely reasons for choosing web-based applications. If you're in an always-on environment, always connected environment, sure. But you also, with these devices that we're talking about, they're mission-critical devices, which means that any moment of downtime could be detrimental to the organization. And having applications that can run offline is extremely important. It means that they can kind of continue their work. And so I think that, yes, there is this kind of assumption that online is fantastic and it's the web version, but I also think that having that thick application is extremely important in those offline scenarios.
Yeah, and I think the question too was, does the fact that people are choosing to move to the cloud change the support model for the devices themselves? Is this a factor to consider?
I mean, probably a little bit, but at the end of the day, you know, browsers still get updated. You know, OSs still get updated. So it's very small. I mean, you still need to be able to remote control into a device to help a user. You know, the weight, if you will, of the applications on your device would be lighter, but quite frankly, these devices have so much horsepower that that's not an issue anymore. So, you know, it really comes down to picking the right application for your environment and your users. And as Shash said, I mean, the biggest downside of, you know, browser is there is no offline. And you know, so many of our applications, you know, in a warehouse, when you're picking, offline is not an option. I mean, that stops the work, right? So you've got to have the ability to ensure that you're running these things
99.99999.
Okay, real quick, Sam. We've only got a couple more minutes, and I wanted to ask one more question. So if you have a quick comment.
Okay, yeah, I'll make it real quick. I was going to say the one thing that people tend to think it's an either or, it's either cloud or not, but it really is another type of outsourcing, right? Cloud is just outsourcing your computer resources. Doesn't mean you have to outsource all of them. You do the ones that make sense so you can focus on the areas where you need to be focusing.
Okay, we've only got a couple more minutes. Real quick question. I want to put the entire panel. If you could give companies one takeaway to remember from today's conversation, what would it be? Greg.
Get your users. I'm going with the same one.
Thanks. Shash.
I would say if you don't use the tools and technology that kind of fit your business needs, you're going to have trouble. Some people don't buy the right technologies, or they buy separate tools to help them and try to piece things together. So you need kind of a platform that helps you with all of those things all in one, that's well integrated together.
Kevin. Lightning round.
Lever the platform to do more with it. You know, we're not providing single function devices anymore. You can add things like, you know, communications, or walkie-talkie like stuff, proximity sensing for contact tracing and things like that. Use the tools to do more with them.
Sam.
I would say that moving platforms is hard and it can be scary, but embrace it. It's really your opportunity to drive your business to the next level. Without this disruption, we would have just stagnated as a business, and this really is an opportunity. And just remember, you're not in it alone. Pull in the experts. We'll help you get where you want to go.
Well, a moving platform from a burning platform is what we're really talking about here. Companies just have to act. I want to thank my panel so much for a fantastic presentation. Greg Hendry of Barcoding, Shash Anand of SOTI, Kevin Lawlick of Zebra Technologies, Sam Gonzalez of Ivanti Wavelink, and ably supported by Jody Costa with audience Q&A. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much, audience. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.